Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, today's going to be a different type of video. Now, usually on this channel, I like to go back and read the literature left behind by the ancestors so we can analyze their mindset, their mentality, their worldview, their attitudes at the time, right? And also because this literature and these documents are typically not included in the mainstream narrative. So it's always good to go back and get a different perspective directly from the source. But in today's video, we're not going to be reading any literature left behind by the ancestors, at least not our ancestors, but we're actually going to be reading literature left behind by a European soldier, a gentleman by the name of Marcus Ransford. He released a book back in 1805, a memoir, so to speak. And in that memoir, he spoke about back in 1799 when he actually visited the French colony of Saint-Domingue during the revolution, during the Haitian Revolution. He actually visited the island and he was actually arrested as a spy and he was almost killed. And he actually wrote in his memoirs the entire account of that whole situation. So, like I said, we're not going to be reading literature left behind by our ancestors, but from somebody else who was actually there, who actually met our ancestors. You know, he actually seen and spoke to Toussaint Louverture face to face. He's seen Christophe face to face, right? He's seen the military. He's seen the colony at that time under the regime of Toussaint Louverture. So it's going to be an interesting account. And let's get into it, right? Let's get to know the author, the writer of the book, Marcus Ransford. Take a look up on the screen. Captain Marcus Ransford was a British Army officer who fought in the Battle of Camden in 1780 during the American Revolutionary War. In 1799, Ransford visited the French colony of Saint-Domingue and had an interview with Toussaint Louverture. He was subsequently arrested and condemned to death as a spy, but he was reprieved and eventually set at liberty. Ransford died in November 1817. Marcus Ransford was a soldier who served for many years with the British Army in the British West Indies. He visited Haiti in 1799, where he became an admirer of Toussaint Louverture. This book is Ransford's account of the uprising that began in August 1791 and the subsequent fighting that at different times involved French, Spanish, and British troops and various Haitian factions. Now, not wasting no time, let's get back into it. So basically, let me set the stage, right? So 1799. So back during this time, the British military had just been destroyed. I believe in 1798, they signed an agreement, a peace agreement with Toussaint Louverture. Basically, you know, no more fighting. You got it. We're going to leave. So 1799, Marcus Ransford, this British Army officer, was masquerading on the colony, claiming to be an American. Eventually, he was discovered, he was arrested, and he was put on trial. So this is going to be the account of what happened during that situation. So let's get into it. Not wasting no time. To avoid the suspicion in which, notwithstanding the recent treaty, the English yet continue to be viewed, and to prevent the probability of injury to his companions, the writer was induced to assume the character of an American. Now, time out. For whatever reason, Marcus Ransford writes in the third person. So when he says the writer, he's talking about himself, the writer, right? So instead of saying, I was induced to assume the character of an American, he instead says the writer himself was induced to assume the character of an American. So for some reason, he speaks in the third person. So anyway, let's continue. The writer was induced to assume the character of an American, which was easy to be effected, as the vessel was ultimately bound to that continent. The crew were permitted to land after certain ceremonies, and the first object which excited their attention was no less than the hero of this novel empire. Toussaint was conversing with the two privates of his forces on the batteries, and when he saw the Europeans approaching, immediately walked towards them, and addressing them in French, inquired about the news and from whence they came and their destination. One served as the respondent for the whole, who spoke in such terms as his character demanded, and the general civilly took his leave. Having been informed of a review which was about to take place on the plain of the Cap, the writer availed himself of the opportunity. Now, like I said, for some reason, he talks in the third person. Instead of saying, I availed myself of the opportunity, he says, the writer availed himself of the opportunity. Also in the book, just to get an idea of the setting, right? So Marcus Ransford, he has just got off the boat, right? Toussaint Louverture, you know, obviously Toussaint was in the area. So he came, you know, greeted the foreigners, right? Introduced himself, you know, I'm Toussaint Louverture, you know, commander in chief, you know, how are you, right? And a military review was about to take place. Now, a military review is when all the top officers, all the top commanders, they inspect the troops, right? It's kind of like a military parade, but You're inspecting the troops, making sure everybody is on deck, making sure everybody's, dressed, to perfection. The weapons are in good condition, making sure everybody is trained and disciplined, right? So this is basically a military review. Marcus Ransford just got off the boat, just met Toussaint. Now he's about to watch the military review. Let's get back into it. Having been informed of a review which was about to take place on the plain of the Cap, the writer availed himself of the opportunity, accompanied by some Americans and a few of his own countrymen who resided there under that denomination. Of the grandeur of the scene, he had not the smallest conception. 2,000 officers were in the field carrying arms, from the general to the ensign, without the smallest symptom of the insubordination that excited in the leisure of the hotel. Each general officer had a demi-brigade, which went through the manual exercise with a degree of expertness seldom witnessed, and performed equally well several maneuvers applicable to their method of fighting. At a whistle, a whole brigade ran 300 or 400 yards. When separating, threw themselves flat on the ground, changing to their backs or their sides, keeping up a strong fire the whole of the time, till they were recalled. Then they formed again in an instant into their wonted regularity. This single maneuver was executed with such facility and precision as totally to prevent cavalry from charging them in bushy and hilly countries. Such complete subordination, with promptitude and dexterity, prevailed the whole time that would have astonished any European soldier who had the smallest idea of the previous situation. Now, time out. Now, Marcus Ransford, what he was astonished by, he was seeing the military science of the black man on display, right? Our style of warfare, our style of fighting, based on speed and agility, quick change of direction, dropping flat on your back, keeping up a fire the whole time. Like, listen, the black man, we different. So Marcus Ransford was like, damn, we're not used to this. We're used to our, traditional European, rigid formations, and here come the black man just, breaking the mold. Now let's continue. For several weeks, he continued to amuse himself with observations on the manners of the people, which he had no idea at the time of preserving beyond the information and amusement of his own friends, and by sketching droughts of the principal posts that were accessible. He enjoyed the habits of a metropolis, and, except the anxiety which would obtrude on account of the delay from his duty, participated in the general happiness. When the time arrived for the departure of the vessel, at an unexpected moment, such is the human heart, he lingered on a spot which he would have before avoided at the hazard of his life. The ship had been repaired, all was ready, and bidding farewell to new connections which had just began to engage him, he returned on board with the agreeable hopes of a speedy arrival at St. Thomas. But after beating about upon the coast for 3 days, in the most perilous circumstances, the unfortunate vessel sprung a leak, when they were compelled to put into Fort Dauphin, or accounting to the revolutionary nomenclature, Fort Égalité. In this situation, the master of the vessel and the writer apprehended no danger or impropriety in going on shore. Hoisting, therefore, Danish colors, they came to anchor under a small fort, when in less than a half hour, the latter was arrested after landing by 4 blacks and a mulatto officer of great ferocity. They returned with him on board and placed him under the care of 2 black sentinels. These informed him in answer to his anxious inquiries that he was suspected of being a spy and that he would be tried on the morrow and of course be condemned. Such was the complacent idea attached to the trial of a stranger, who was afterwards to defend the character of their chief. Apprehensions of different kinds now crowded his imagination. He did not know whether suspicions might not have occurred at Cap Français, and the commandant of the district had been prepared for his arrival. He was aware that in a few instances he had ventured farther than he should have done. Early in the morning, he was taken on shore and examined by a black general named Muro. Now, there was no black general named Muro. His name was Moise. That was Toussaint Louverture's nephew, Moise. Now, in the book, he probably didn't know his name, so he wrote his name down as Muro. But the black general Muro was actually Moise Louverture, the nephew of Toussaint Louverture. Now, let's continue. He was taken on shore and examined by a black general named Muro, the commanding officer of the district. He could not help thinking that his appearance augured well, for he bore the principal mythological characteristic of justice. He was totally blind in one eye and appeared to see but little through the other. He, however, relieved the prisoner from the apprehension of any charge existing previous for the moment, for he began his examination by insisting that he was not an American, but an English spy. So time out. So basically, Moise let Marcus Ransford know, listen, brother, you've been walking around the colony talking about you're an American. We don't believe you, right? You're an illegal alien. You're an illegal migrant masquerading as an American when you're really a British soldier. And just last year in 1798, we just smashed you on the battlefield, right? We kicked you boys out the country. So why are you back here, back in the colony, bro? You're going to jail. Put your hands behind your back, right? So that's where we at in the book. Let's continue. He began his examination by insisting that he was not an American but an English spy, reconnoitering the coast, and closed it by acquainting him that a court-martial already summoned would assemble on the morrow, and his trial would be prompt and decisive. So Moise said, listen, you're not going to be here long. Trust me, we're going to have your trial ASAP, right? You're not going to be sitting for a long time. We're going to get you in front of Christoph real soon. No worry. Come with me, brother. Come with me, right? Let's continue. He was then conducted to a dark prison and treated with the utmost indignity. There was no bed, nor had he had any other provision than some coarse dry fish, which he could not eat. A treatment, he was afterwards informed, was used to prisoners during the space between the apprehension and trial to prevent any opportunity for the contrivance of evasion. At the hour of 10, he was brought before a regular military court, composed of 12 black general officers, and the etiquette of which astonished him. General Christoph, being in a neighboring district, presided, and Muro. All right, so listen, I'm gonna say his name Moise because they obviously got the name wrong. So I'm not gonna say Muro. I'm not gonna disrespect the ancestor like that. So I'm gonna refer to him by his actual name, Moise. Now let's continue. General Christoph, being in a neighboring district, presided, and Moise sat on his right hand. They interrogated him with the utmost discrimination and acuteness, appearing perfectly conversant with the nature of the business. But for the commandant already named, not a look nor an attitude escaped him, and he darted his eye, in which both seemed to have centered an uncommon degree of fire, over every part of the prisoner, the form of whose headdress he insisted was not an American. Now, time out. So now at this part of the story, now Marcus Ransford, he's been arrested. He's been sitting in jail for a little while. Right now, he's finally at trial. Now, Christoph is presiding over his trial. Now, Christoph, at this time, 32 years old, the premier military officer in the Northern Military Department, right? He has multiple, job descriptions, right? At 32 years old, he is the commander-in-chief in the North, right? And not only that, but he is also the chief of military justice. As you can see, he's presiding over military court proceedings, right? So if anybody's charged with espionage, treason, desertion, conspiracy, you're going to go before a judge, and Christoph is going to be presiding over your trial. He's going to be handing out the death sentence. Yes, indeed. Christoph loved to hand out death, right? Christoph was like, what? Death. Court dismissed. And not only that, but Christoph also oversaw all the activity that was occurring in the northern ports because he was in control of the northern port city, which was the busiest city in all of the colonies, right? So the arrival, the departure of ships, commercial ships, military ships, right? Making sure we inspecting the cargo for contraband, weapons, things like that, collecting the taxes and the tariffs and the duties, right? So Christoph oversaw a lot of activity in the north. Now, during this trial, you can see Marcus Ransford gives us a direct account of, Christoph's physical appearance, right? Because he actually seen Christoph face to face. And you can see in the book, it says that not a look or an attitude escaped him, and he darted his eyes, in which both seemed to have centered an uncommon degree of fire over every part of the prisoner. The form of his headdress, he said, was not an American. So Christoph was examining Marcus Ransford, head to toe, examining him, with the fire in his eyes. And he said, I'm looking at how you're dressed, but you're not an American, bro. You don't dress like an American. That's not how Americans dress, bro. You're lying, right? You're lying, right? You're a liar. Now let's continue. He was put on his defense in equal form, but all he could urge had not the smallest effect, as he had no passports nor any American papers to exhibit. Notwithstanding every appearance to the contrary, they had some decisive testimony of imprudent liberty on the island, and after several hours deliberation, he was condemned to suffer death as quickly as possible. Now listen, what I told y'all, man, Christoph, as the chief military justice, yes, he loved to hand out death. What? He did what? Death. He got caught doing what? Death. You said he did what? Death. Let's continue. The master of the vessel behaved with dignity of his character and the utmost solicitude. He protested against the judgment, but without effect, and the prisoner was remanded till the sentence should be transmitted to the General en Chef for his approval. Now, the General en Chef, that was Toussaint Louverture, right? Basically, ultimately, everything needed to go through Toussaint Louverture for the final judgment. Yes, Christoph gave his verdict, yes, death, but he has to now send his judgment to Toussaint for Toussaint to review it and give his final approval, right? So ultimately, we see the chain of command. Now let's continue. He was then remanded to a different kind of prison, which, though little superior in terms of accommodation, had the advantage of air and the communication of the human species, though only by stealth. It was the remains of a dilapidated building, the part of which, appropriated to the prisoner, was secured with strong iron bars, in a fashion then very prevalent. He had also the encumbrance of a chain from the right arm to the left foot. For 14 days, he lay in the agony of suspense between life and death, with every evening the cruel intimation that he would certainly be hanged the following morning. However, on the morning of the 15th day, when he had ventured to disengage himself of part of his dress for the purpose of a temporary relief from the weight of the chains, the answer of Toussaint had arrived, bringing, instead of confirmation of his sentence, an order from that truly great man for his release, and to be suffered to proceed on his voyage, with the prohibition conveyed with much shrewdness, but the greatest magnanimity, that he must never return to the island without proper passports. Now, time out. Now, like I said, everything had to go through Toussaint for the final approval. So Toussaint finally came back and said, listen, I know you were arrested for espionage, and listen, my young boys was about to kill you. You know, Christophe, he told me, he sent me the verdict. He said, listen, we're going to kill him, chief. And I came and I said, listen, you don't got to do all that, little bro. You don't got to do all that. I'm going to come and we're going to let him go. Let him go with a warning. You know, we don't got to kill him for that. You know, we don't got to kill him for that. It's all good. It's all good. We can let him go with a slap on the wrist. You know, make sure you come back with your proper documents and your papers next time. You know, we're not going to kill you this time, bro. Go on your way. Go on your merry way. And it was because of that Marcus Ransford always had love and respect for Toussaint and later on guys like Christophe. And in fact, years later down the line, when Christophe would actually become king in the north, Marcus Ransford would actually end up being one of his close connections out in London, right? One of his, intermediaries out in London when he would, conduct business and do deals over in London, right? It's actually a funny story, right? We got a British soldier ends up getting arrested, almost gets killed by the Haitian military. Toussaint Louverture comes and, decreases his sentence down, saves his life. And he actually becomes a huge fan of the Haitian revolutionary leaders, right? Out in London, he becomes a huge supporter of the Haitian leaders, afterwards. And he even wrote this book, paying homage, paying tribute to the brothers. It's kind of a funny story, do your research, Captain Marcus Ransford from the British military. And in fact, in this book, because like I said, he actually seen the ancestors face to face in person. He's seen Toussaint in person. He's seen Christophe in person. He's seen Dessalines in person. He's seen Moise in person, right? He's seen the guys, face to face, up close and personal. And he actually gives an account of Toussaint Louverture in the book. Take a look up on the screen. In person, Toussaint was of a manly form, above the middle stature, with a countenance bold and striking, yet full of the most prepossessing suavity, terrible to an enemy, but inviting to the objects of his friendship or his love. His manners and his deportment were elegant when occasion required, but easy and familiar in common, and when an inferior addressed him, he bent with the most obliging assiduity, and adapted himself precisely, without seeming condescension to the peculiar circumstances. He received in public a general and voluntary respect, which he was anxious to return, or rather to prevent, by the most pleasing civilities. His uniform was a kind of blue jacket with a large red cape flailing over the shoulders, red cuffs with 8 rows of lace on the arm, and a pair of large gold epaulets thrown back, scarlet waistcoat and pantaloons, with half boots, a round hat and a red feather, and a national cockade. These, with an extreme large sword, formed his equipment. He was an astonishing horseman and traveled with inconceivable rapidity. Now, there you have it, folks. There you have it. The story of Marcus Ransford, the British soldier that was arrested by the army of Toussaint Louverture, and he almost lost his life. But by the gracious nature of Toussaint, he lived to see another day. But anyways, man, it's your boy Nevercard Dessalines back in the Billy S&D, 21 Cannons, first single off the next album. Check it out. Pin comment at the top. Subscribe to the Patreon, NTD1814. Link in the description. And I'm gone. Peace.
Walk in the room and I stop all that talking. Stay on alert and I'm moving with caution. Feeling like baby, I'm up in New Orleans. Feeling like Stunner, feeling like Wheezy. Look at my neck and my wrist is Fiji. Trying to get cash, I don't wanna be famous. Look at my neck and my wrist contagious. Ain't no stopping when I get started. Ain't no stopping, gotta go harder. Drop that top, whip go brainless. Chasing that check, I ain't trying to be famous. Whipping that Benz, feeling like spaceships. Everything official, ain't no fake shit. Doors unlocked, community gated. Look at this ice, bet they gon' hate it. Look at my life, enemy vacant. vanquished. And it's on sight, gun in your faces. Look at that love, turn to hatred. Kill my ops like a Haitian. Ain't no love, ain't no honor, ain't no trust, ain't no conscience. I ain't perfect, but I'm honest. Enemy lurking, enemy watching, enemy stalking, taking photos 24/7. Straight surveillance, hit a new spot, change location. Shorty got wet off my cadence. Just see ice, but I got papers. Ladies love me, and I got flavors. Ain't no love in these streets. Nèg yo jaloux, yo méchant. Got them chains off my feet, by the sword and by the gun. They throw flowers at my feet, and they say that I'm the one, and they say that I'm the target. When they see me, they pay homage. Shorty talking about divesting, she with Malibu most wanted. When I go and get that check, I put it up and make it stack. Breaking that bank, whipping that Benzo. When I pull off, it go fast. Need a Fortune 5 accountant just to count up all this cash. Got these samples trying to sue me just to make me walk it back. Yeah, walk in the room and I stop all that talking. Stay on alert and I'm moving with caution. Feeling like baby, I'm up in New Orleans. Feeling like stunner, feeling like Weezy. Look at my nigga, my wrist is Fiji. Trying to get cash, I don't wanna be famous. Look at my nigga, my wrist contagious. Ain't no stopping when I get started. Ain't no stopping, gotta go harder. Drop that top, whip go brainless. Chasing that check, I ain't trying to be famous. Whipping that Benz, feeling like spaceships. Everything official, ain't no fake shit. Doors unlocked, community gated. Look at this ice, bet they gon' hate it. Look at my life, enemy vanquished. And it's on sight, gun in your faces. Look at that love, turn to hatred. Kill my ops like a Haitian. Ain't no love, ain't no honor, ain't no trust, ain't no conscience. I ain't perfect, but I'm honest. Enemy lurking, enemy watching, enemy stalking, taking photos 24/7. Straight surveillance, hit a new spot, change location. Shorty got wet off my cadence. Just see ice, but I got papers. Ladies love me, and I got flavors. Ain't no love in these streets. Nèg yo jaloux, yo méchant.